Hello and a warm welcome to another episode of Desi FIRE Podcast. मैं हूं आपका होस्ट रवि हांडा और इस चैनल पे हम लोग बात करते हैं फिनेंशियल फ्रीडम के बारे में, अर्ली रिटायरमेंट के बारे में। और आज इन बातों के लिए मेरे साथ में हैं शंकर सर। शंकर सर ने आज से 10 साल पहले कॉर्पोरेट लाइफ को अलविदा कह दिया था। उससे पहले वो एडलवाइस में एक इक्विटी एनालिस्ट की पोजीशन पे थे, जो कि वो बोलते हैं बहुत ज़्यादा उनकी मदद नहीं करी अर्ली रिटायर करने में। उस बारे में भी जानेंगे। और उसके बाद से आज की डेट में ये एक सेबी रजिस्टर्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट एडवाइज़र हैं और ये लोगों की, मुझ जैसे लोगों की, आप जैसे लोगों की मदद करते हैं उनकी फाइनेंशियल प्लानिंग करने में और कभी कभी अर्ली रिटायर करने में भी। वेलकम सर।
Thank you, Ravi. Such a nice and kind introduction of yours.
अरे बिल्कुल सर, मतलब मैं तो सोच रहा था कि ये सब पॉडकास्ट करने का ये फ़ायदा होता है कि मेरे को ऐसे लोगों से मिलने का मौका मिल जाता है जो कि वो कर रहे हैं, जो कि मैं करना चाहता हूँ। अगर मैं आज से 10 साल बाद में एक ऐसी पोजीशन पे रहता हूँ कि मैं लोगों की मदद कर पा रहा हूँ उनकी फिनेंशियल लाइफ को थोड़ा सा सॉर्ट आउट करने के लिए, वही उद्देश्य है। उसी उद्देश्य से तो मैंने ये चैनल बनाना चालू किया कि यार कोई बैठ के देख लेगा, सुन लेगा, शायद उसका कोई फ़ायदा ही हो जाए। सो इट्स ऑलवेज अ प्लेजर। तो सर, मैं सबसे पहले चालू इसी बात से करना चाहूँगा कि आप एडलवाइस में थे, वहाँ पे आप इक्विटी एनालिस्ट वगैरह का काम करते थे। उससे आपका ये जो फिनेंशियल प्लानिंग का, अर्ली रिटायरमेंट का, कॉर्पोरेट लाइफ से बाहर जाने का, पैसे को मैनेज करने का, ये जो सारी चीज़ें हैं, उससे आपकी कितनी मदद हुई, कितना आपको फ़ायदा हुआ, या अगर आप इन्फोसिस में भी काम कर रहे होते तो भी स्थिति सेम ही रहती?
Simple answer, yes. It would not have changed whether the kind of a industry that I was in or the kind of job I was doing, because I was doing equity markets. That did not have a role to play. The more important thing that happened was the process that I was thinking of what should be the figure at which, or at what stage in my life I need to press the pause button and start doing something which would really help me, or in trying to grow myself, as well as trying to really add meaning to my life, and if possible try and give back to the society. That was the broad intention in which it was doing. Now the typical question that everybody asks is, how did I manage to do that from more in that sense? So it is because at that time there was not a formal industry per se which used to guide it like this. So all the things that I did was extremely practical, in the sense like a day-to-day basis, how will I manage my expenses? So it literally took me a couple of years to jot down the last decimal in terms of where all my spend is happening. So really being on top of the expenses is what the bulk of the effort happened in the first, and then trying to create buffer on each of them. So the typically was, I at least wanted 1.5 times my annual expenses to be coming in as a recurring stuff, not doing any withdrawal. What today in today's term that people talk about as systematical withdrawal plan or SWP, that's not the way I wanted it. So I wanted it something through a recurring cash flow. So that became my one corpus. The other corpus was something called as what I thought was a growth corpus, where the money will keep on growing. So in case things go out of hand, or inflation shoots up, or something other things happen, so that grows separately. And interestingly, the way, once again, it was more practical way of I calculated the growth corpus was, it has to grow at least at par with the inflation rate. So even if I were to draw, that growth corpus should earn at least equivalent to inflation rate, and at that time it was something like probably 7% or 8% types and all. Apart from this, another thing, two important things which I did in terms of to ensure that there is more mental peace, because all these things are being done more to create a peaceful environment for both for myself as well as from a family perspective, is first and foremost, assume at any point of time 10% of this corpus will go bad. Okay, so that gives you a certain kind of a cushion in that sense. So by and large, with this kind of a perspective, you woke and stepped out and tried to pursue it in that sense.
फेयर. मैं पैसे के बारे में तो बात करूंगा सर थोड़ा, बट आज से 10 साल पहले जब आपने ये स्टेप लिया, उस टाइम पे तो ये सब फायर वगैरह का नाम भी नहीं के बराबर था.
मुझे अभी भी नहीं समझ में आ रहा फायर क्या होता है, बट ठीक है. अपार्ट फ्रॉम द फायर इन द
हाँ, सर देखिए, चैनल देखिए, इसीलिए बनाया है. बट आपके जो यार दोस्त लोग थे, जो भी आपका सर्कल था, वो तो फिर नहीं उतना रहा होगा वंस यू लेफ्ट योर जॉब. और उसके ऊपर आपका जो सोसाइटी के अंदर जो आपका पोजीशन था, उन सब चीज़ों के ऊपर क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ा आपके इस डिसीजन का?
वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट. सो आई ऑफन से दैट when somebody is retiring, pegging the number or arriving at the number is the easiest part. Okay, the biggest challenge somebody has to encounter is two ways. One is that they have to be very, very clear cut in their mind what they are going to do after retirement. In other words, what are they going to do with the spare time? How will they be emotionally strong with that? Because like you rightly said, your neighbors and all or somebody in the family will almost take you for granted. Okay. So that is fairly very, very important. What do you want to do? Because I was very clear. So when I put a full stop in that sense from a corporate job, when I started it, the thought was basically, at least I don't want to work for money. I want to work, but from a value add perspective. अगर कुछ मिला तो करूँगा, नहीं तो the mental model was कुछ नहीं मिला वो assume करके आप करो, because I was already 45, very unlikely to get kind of once again into the job. So that was the thought process. So the first thing is people have to realize what they are going to do. And secondly, being emotionally very strong and give a very confident reply. Why have you left the job? If you are not certain with that kind of a response, both in terms of oral communications and body communication, you are bound to get distressed. Or your mind is likely to get swayed like a pendulum and those things. So that is very important for somebody to do. So mentally I was very clear, मैं कुछ ही नहीं करने वाला. I will be like a couch potato, not necessarily seeing TV, but literally doing nothing. So it took a lot of pains to make people understand how can you do nothing. So I said that come home and see. That way.
Doing nothing is a talent in itself. Yes. So उसमें कोई doubt नहीं है.
कोई एक पिक्चर में I remember a dialogue सुना था कि जो कुछ नहीं करते हैं वो कमाल करते हैं. I don't know whether that only God will tell me whether I did कमाल or not. Yeah.
नहीं तो but let me ask you that question. Why did you leave your job? आप एक Edelweiss में थे, आप एक बड़ी कंपनी है, वहाँ पे आप एक equity analyst की पोजीशन पे काम कर रहे थे, which I believe is very intellectually stimulating as well. And then ये analyst लोग जो हैं वो जिन सर्कल्स के अंदर घूमते हैं, ऐसा भी नहीं है कि उनको सेल्स करने के लिए डोर टू डोर जाना पड़ रहा है. So it sounds like a really nice, fancy job. It's a great blue collar job. Why did you leave it?
Okay, so there is a kind of a yes, it sounds very glamorous.
It looks very glamorous कि अरे बैठ के हाँ ये कंपनी 5,000 करोड़ की होनी चाहिए, 10,000 करोड़ की होनी चाहिए का काम कर रहा हूँ मैं.
Yes, so from a profile perspective, it is surely glamorous. It continues to be glamorous. But from a content-wise, it is not so much glamorous from a day-to-day work kind of thing. After a certain point of time, it gets onto you. So in a way, that growth at a personal level and what you can further add value to the potential, that is what I was seeking, and that was not there. Second and most importantly, there was something kind of called as a content that I was there. कि boss, I'm content with what I'm doing currently. मुझे और कुछ करना है. I want to add certain value, both to myself or the organization where I'm going to work henceforth, or to the people at large. Because at some point of time, surrounding the same time, I realized one thing. The richest person is also seeking money. And the poorest of poor is also seeking money in some form or the other. Okay. So kahin to kuch to gadbad hai, right? There has to be a full stop somewhere, right? You can't be in that perennial trap of aur chahiye, because where the full stop? So that kind of a content also happened. I'm not necessarily saying it's from a financial perspective, but overall, like they say in what I strongly believe in something called as a trinity of health: physical, emotional, and financial. All the three has to be there in equal proponent. So I've been a believer on that in that sense. So one has to be having that kind of a content. All the three has to be in equal balance. Excess of one will not offset deficiency in the other. So that is what I've been, and probably I reached that stage, and then that is how it happened.
Fair. Now let's talk a little bit about the financial aspect of it. You talked about one part of your money was essentially which generates certain cash flow to take care of stuff, and the other part is the growth aspect of it. How did you manage both of these? So how did you put in corpus in a way that it generates the required cash flow, and what did you do with the money that you put in for the growth aspect of it, which meets the inflation returns?
Okay. So interestingly, since I was like I said, at least 2 to 3 years prior to when I actually retired, probably even 4 years, I've been always looking out to how to first of all arrive at that stage. So whenever I got an opportunity of good quality debt instrument paper, so there were combination of tax-free bonds issued by government of India enterprises at that point of time.
ऐसा होता है क्या आज भी?
वो time पे था. So and those used to give at a tax-free rate of anywhere between 8.75 to 8.92%. There were a host of papers. Okay, so that I invested something called as in perpetual bonds of reputed organizations. Then there were certain called as NCDs, non-convertible debentures. All these were high-yielding, high-quality papers, which I worked backwards and found out कि इतना डालूंगा इसमें से, so that will happen. And interestingly, while even though my salary at that point in time was not sufficient enough, but I knew there were certain cash flows I'm going to get in the subsequent months, I intelligently or smartly I took loans to subscribe to some of these papers.
Okay.
So that's how the corpus got built. So this was by and large, so it is like becomes a recurring, and then there is safety. Then the growth was by and large mutual funds. For all the growth thing was all mutual funds.
Okay. So I want to understand about this bonds bit a little bit better. Essentially, they are debt instruments that you are targeting. Why not just go in for a debt mutual fund itself? See, you are talented, you will be able to pick the good bonds, etc. that is there. But don't you think that going in with a debt mutual fund and maybe just withdrawing whatever you need from it, wouldn't that be a better idea and a more tax efficient way to do it? Because I don't think ये 8.5 का टैक्स फ्री बॉन्ड अगर मिल रहा है तो सर मैं चैनल बंद कर रहा हूँ, सारा पैसा उसमें जाके आज डाल दूंगा, कहानी खत्म.
Exactly.
अब तो नहीं है ये सब ऑप्शन.
Exactly. So the point at that point of time, I quite very early realized that getting a 2.5% alpha over inflation on a post-tax basis, and most of these papers were between 15 to 20 years. Okay. So the maturity as we speak right now will be somewhere in 2033, 2034 types and all. So that's the reason you have to lock in. So history, if you go back in history, you will notice there will be pockets of time where actually you get these benefits, or rather the opportunities to lock in this kind of a good instruments and all. That became a far more better basis in terms of even after post-tax returns as compared to a mutual fund. Because in mutual fund what will happen is they will have to true up their NAV because they are sitting with such a large corpus. Invariably, there will be some kind of an problem with one or the other paper where they will have to provide and all of that. And then they have their own issues with respect to interest rate cycles and all of that. So if I'm investing in something like a hypothetically a 10% paper, even if they are investing, but because of the cycle and all, the actual return does not happen to be 10%. And then there is the taxation wise also, it was not efficient in that sense, because you had to wait for, even at that time, 3 years for indexation benefits and all of that. Otherwise, it was marginal tax rate. Here, you could manage it. And most importantly, I had my mother and my wife. I also invested through them in that sense. Obviously, their own income and all of that. So there was some amount of a tax planning also which happened. So that's how collectively as a family, I ensured that the cash flows match, the choice of the instruments match, and the tax planning also match in that sense.
Okay. I have heard this from multiple people कि अपनी wife के नाम पे या mom के नाम पे आप invest कर सकते हो. Can you give us a little more details? How does this part work? Aren't there tax implications in it if I'm giving my wife some money and investing in her name and
so
stuff?
not necessarily I giving them money. So
Okay.
the point is, my wife is already working. My mother was a pensioner, so she had her own set of things. And typically, being an Hindu family, for some of the other reasons, you keep on getting gifts and other stuff. And all. So there are certain amount of accumulation that is happening over the period of time. And I've been filing my mother's returns at least for the last 30 years, or slightly more than 30 years. So there has been a gradual kind of a build-up in that sense. So that's a traditional path. Apart from this, as per the tax laws, there are two options that is always there. One is that depending upon how you see it. So there is something called as a gift between certain relations that you can give, which is not taxable. The second option is you can give a loan, which is between the relatives. So depending upon what works, depending upon your chartered accountant and all of that, these are a couple of options. The third options, which some other people also do, is they have something called an HUF kind of stuff and all. But I had never explored the HUF option. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. So it was more like a generic wealth and all of that in that sense. So by utilizing, because the moment mother becomes a senior citizen, at that point of time, the tax slab was better. So, all of that.
Fair. And then coming to the mutual fund part of it, how did you take a call on, okay, because there are 2,000 mutual funds that
So
exist.
at that point of time, obviously, that is what led to what I'm doing right now. Is obviously I went like everybody else, was guided by certain distributors at that point of time. So whatever they said was the right thing. I invested in that sense.
And did it work out for you? Were you happy with the recommendation? Now, coming back to it.
With the benefit of hindsight, obviously no. Because that's the reason in 2018, post 2018, is when I realized, let me start taking the ownership of myself, because my growth corpus was flat after 5-6 years.
So you're talking about what,
2013 onwards, 2013 to 2018, with 5 years, I'm back to square one on the growth corpus.
How is that possible? That has been, as far as my memory serves, that was a pretty good period for the Indian stock market.
Yes, for the index, yes, but because there were only a handful of stocks which were doing well, which is part of the index. In the correction that happened in the year 2018, quite a bit of like in terms of mutual funds and other, quite a few corrected, and so at an absolute level. And now this is despite I following to the T in terms of asset allocation, rather in terms of split between large cap, mid cap, small cap, this, that, and whatever was guided, supposed to be based on my profile, all of that. Despite them also knowing that I will be eventually retired within a short span of time, despite following to the T, it didn't work out. So that's when I realized about something is
amiss.
Yes.
Okay. So you didn't really have, let's say, a SEBI RIA who was guiding you at that point of time. Did you know about when did you come to know about SEBI RIAs?
Somewhere in 2020, when I started writing articles on personal finance and trying to, whatever my learnings were post 2018, when I started doing research, कि कैसा करना चाहिए, when does equity does well, when does debt does well, how has other economies or other markets have done, what are the key variables, how can we simplify it, how can we look at only historical variables rather than prospective variables? After doing all those kind of a research, I realized, and after writing articles, and I realized that this is what it can be done, and there's a much better way of at least both scientific and practical way of doing it. And that's how when I realized, because then suddenly I was told that even if I'm guiding people based on the same principles, you need to be registered, and you can't do it for free of cost. So that's when I ended up taking SEBI registration, RIA registration and all of that.
Okay. तो बट मतलब तब तक आपको पता नहीं था कि आप म्यूचुअल फंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स की, बिकॉज आई बिलीव RIAs हैव एग्जिस्टेड फ्रॉम व्हाट 2014-13 के आसपास से चालू हुए थे, हैं तो अभी भी नहीं. आई थिंक अभी भी इट्स अंडर 1000 RIAs who are probably active.
There are, yes, but many people have like given up the registration. The active guys, what I'm told, I'm not so sure, it's something like 500-600 guys out of the more than 1,000 odd people who have taken.
What I know about RIAs, and I know about it is because I'm working on the AI part, which we will come to in a little bit later in the show. आपको एक तो एग्ज़ाम देना पड़ता है, फिर उसके बाद में आपको सेबी को अप्लाई करना पड़ता है, उसकी थोड़ी सी आपकी फ़ीस लगती है, और फिर उसके बाद में आपके कंप्लायंसेस वगैरह रहते हैं, एंड आप खुद ही एज एन इंडिविजुअल कर रहे हैं. Do you have a big team or something which is managing this compliance, etc.?
No, not at all. Everything I'm doing myself.
तो अगर एक इंसान अकेला ये सब कर सकता है, तो फिर क्यों इतने कम हैं? Why isn't it more popular in your opinion?
I seriously don't know, because for me, I've kept my offering very simple. So if I kept my offering very simple, then I don't have to comply in terms of too much of paperwork in that sense. So one of the reason I can think about is maybe people want to do much more, or they want to grow much more wider. I am in this for the long haul. My objective is to much more to educate and show them the easier and the simpler way of, and lastly obviously the practical path of being financially healthy, rather than just trying to identify the next best scheme or the next best instrument, so on and so forth and all of that. And obviously I don't do stocks. I don't do direct equity at all. So maybe these are some of the reasons why it could be there. And there are certain things maybe in the compliance, they think maybe it is hindering them in terms from a growth perspective. I don't know. I seriously don't know.
Okay. नहीं, because मेरे को as a client, if I am thinking, I will like to go to the person who will give me the best quality advice. Now, whether he is a bank relationship manager or a mutual fund distributor or a SEBI RIA, that is secondary. भाई वो काम कर रहा है, अपने पैसा जैसे उसको कमाना है वो कमाएगा. But among all of these, RIA seems to be the most conflict free in terms of, अब अगर मैं जज कर सकता हूँ कौन बढ़िया है, तब तो ठीक है यार, आई विल पिक एक्स कि अच्छा हाँ मेरे को पता है अमित इज़ बेटर देन शंकर, तो मैं अमित के पास में चला गया. बट अगर मेरे को कुछ नहीं पता है, विच इज़ द केस विद मेजॉरिटी ऑफ पीपल लुकिंग फॉर हेल्प, आई वुड बिलीव दे शुड प्रॉबेबली बी गोइंग टू एन RIA, क्योंकि आपको ये तो पता है ना कि कम से कम उसका कोई कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट नहीं है. एंड इफ दैट इज ट्रू, दैट विल मीन, by going by the principles of economics, कि यार ये बढ़िया चीज़ है तो इसका पिकअप जो है वो बहुत ज़्यादा होना चाहिए, because then more people will be going to more RIAs, so then we will need more RIAs. मेरे को RIAs के बारे में पता पड़ा था कुछ 2-3 साल पहले पोस्ट कोविड में, कहीं सुन रहा था तो मेरे को लगा यार ये तो बढ़िया आदमी है. एंड मैं सारे यूज़र्स को भी बोलना चाहूँगा कि आप गूगल जाके कीजिएगा, फिक्स्ड फी RIAs SEBI-registered इन्वेस्टमेंट एडवाइजर्स होते हैं, जो कि आपसे पहले से ही बता देंगे कि सर मैं आपसे इतनी फ़ीस लेने वाला हूँ और मैं आपको ये काम करके दूंगा. वो जो भी इंसान है, वो जो भी है, अब उसका नॉलेज कितना अच्छा है कितना बुरा है, दैट कैन बी डिबेटेड, बट वो आपको कभी कोई गलत प्रोडक्ट नहीं बेचेगा, क्योंकि ऐसा नहीं है ना कि उसको आपको यूलिप बेच के जो है उसको ज़्यादा कमीशन मिलने वाला है, या कोई NFO बेच के आपको कुछ करने वाला है. But I don't find that many people opting for that as a it's a challenge that exists.
Because probably you answered it yourself in terms of one is that the conflict of interest. Not many people would be knowing that there is a conflict of interest in terms of other profession. When I'm saying they might not have scratched the surface in that sense. The second could be is, look, in almost all the other intermediaries, if you look at it, nobody charges any money to the customer or the investor in this case. So
they are charging money, sir. वो 1%
no,
ज़्यादा रहता है.
the RIA charges this guy, but he doesn't, the customer doesn't pay from his pocket, right? The AMC or the insurance company or the PMS or the broker. So it is inbuilt as part of the either the NAV or the insurance policy amount or whatever. So somebody else gives to the intermediary. The customer doesn't sign a check for that, you know. So in India, we are still not evolved to pay for a service, if you notice. So maybe for both of these reasons, it could be the case. Now, just to relate to this and to your one of your earlier questions, why many people look, if I'm going to service an RIA, let us assume, whether if I do it at an individual level and whatever. So there is a time bandwidth of how much I can do. Even if I embrace technology and do it all of that, I have to spend a certain amount of time in terms of physically and intellectually trying to both interact as well as design this customized product. So given whatever the 365 calendar days, and since I have to also review with the same client, maybe if you have to be really true to your profession and true to your service, maybe you will not be able to do more than 150. Okay, point number one. And add on to the point that if you can't charge them more because the service ka concept nahi hai. So then as a business model, many people saying that main ye kyun karu? Because then you're basically, after hitting 150, you have hit a ceiling. Then you have to take more RIAs, get into a firm. And once you do that, there is 1 or 2 levels of first dilution will happen. Then the secondly, because you're chasing numbers and all of that, something or other will happen. Maybe these are the combination of reasons why it could be the case. But at the same time, let me be very frank and tell you that quite a few RIAs were doing terrifically well. There are certain guys who are saying that I'm happy and I don't want to take any further clients. One. Then there are RIAs who are saying that since you don't fit these kind of a criteria, I don't want to take you as my client. So there are certain guys who are also doing that in that sense. So like I said, to each his own. And I want to do this after learning my own, the mishaps that I went through. This is one area where India especially requires too much of help. Literally too much of help. And I don't know whether you have heard about this data point. Like Indians have been amongst the top 3 countries in terms of saving as a percentage of income. And this has been happening probably for the last 30 odd years. But I was surprised to know that we are not amongst the top 30 or 40 countries in terms of wealth. So this is where I want to change. So philosophically speaking, culturally we are rich, but by conduct we have slipped. So your savings is there, but the wealth is not there. That's what I want. And it's a simple thing. There is not a rocket science. And which is the other thing which I want to change, that investment is not rocket science. It's a simple science. It is not an art.
Fair. तो सर अभी आपने बात करी कि जो RIAs होते हैं कई बार they don't take all types of clients की limits रहेंगी which might limit their growth etc. अगर मैं आपकी बात करूं, आपके पास में किस टाइप के clients को आप accept करते हैं और अगर आप सबको एक्सेप्ट, पहली बात तो आप किस टाइप के क्लाइंट्स को एक्सेप्ट करते
मैं
हैं?
सभी तरीके का क्लाइंट को एक्सेप्ट करता हूँ. सो आई हैव हैड क्लाइंट्स हु हैव बीन अर्निंग 50,000 rupees per month to right from 5 crores in a year. So I have accepted all kinds of clients. Yeah.
वो दिक्कत. बट आपके पास में एक टिपिकल क्लाइंट जो आता है, वो किस टाइप के क्लाइंट्स आपके पास में टिपिकली आते हैं? क्या उनकी दिक्कतें रहती हैं? क्यों वो एक RIA के पास में या आपके पास में आ रहे हैं? हाउ डज दैट वर्क?
So the most common, if I have to find out, is what is the reason that they are coming for to an RIA is they have a plethora of schemes. They have been invested through either whomsoever, even if they have done direct or whatever. It has been for a plethora of schemes. So it is like haphazard. They themselves don't know why they have invested.
रायता फैला हुआ है.
Exactly. That's one. The second thing is somewhere they have a notion in the back of the mind, which is a true insight, that something is not working. So that something is not working could be for different angles. One is that the anticipated return is not happening. They are not sure whether they will be able to meet some of the goals which they have targeted through the savings. And lastly, some kind of a mis-selling has happened. Okay, so due to a combination of these things is when they decide, let's go to an RIA and do that in that sense. So these are some of the things which actually also helps people like me to try and address their problem in a much better fashion.
I'd like to maybe, if you can take an example that it's typically a 35-year-old married guy who comes to you and says that, okay, I'm making 20 lakh rupees a year. Tell me where to invest 5 lakh rupees. Is that the conversation? Is that how it goes? Or
No.
How does that work?
No, that doesn't work. Like I said, the problem is slightly earlier, right? He has already been investing, he has been doing his SIPs.
So he comes to you with a portfolio that this is my portfolio.
Yeah, this is already have been happening, but I'm not so sure. I don't know whether I'll meet my goals. I want to retire at certain age. Is it possible or not? I don't think so. It is possible. Please help me. Please guide me. And I have certain legacy stuff. I don't know what to do. Is it the right thing? That kind of stuff.
So they come to you. What is the process like? I walk into your office, meet you. What happens after that?
So basically, I try and explain the entire process of how I do it. What are the process that I follow, right from, and what all he will get. And most importantly, I tell him the typical 8 kind of services or a final product that he will get from me, right from his financial health score that he will have, risk assessment, the true assessment of his goals, financial goals, because many a times they have not adjusted for inflation, and whether the children are going to get study here or abroad, the cost is different. All those kind of a candid discussion with him and trying to help. When I'm saying him, it's gender agnostic, so both him and her. That's another thing. I try to insist on both the husband and the wife being there, because it's fairly important that the lady of the house also knows about what is happening, because then the decision making and the sustaining the entire financial journey is far more stronger, healthier, and long lasting. So goals, then how much exactly should be the insurance, both the term and the medical. Then based on the goals where the investments are going to happen, where the asset allocation become a subset because of this. Then 2 more things is, one is drawing the cash flow statement, because from the current year till the 85th year, because I explained to them why 85 and all of that as a life expectancy. And lastly, what I tend to do is I provide them a sensitivity analysis depending upon under what circumstances things change and what to do and all of that. So I explain this entire process and then I tell him for doing these things I will require certain kind of an information from him and explain what are the kind of an information that I required. And if he says that, yeah, okay, then I say he wants to go ahead. Then I say that as per SEBI norms, I have to comply with certain kind of a guidelines and paperwork. He says that, yeah, okay. Once he does that, Then once he's enrolled, obviously paying the advance and all of that, I share him the document for where he can send me the data. I work on a tentative plan based on that. And during this process of when I'm working on the plan, post getting the data, obviously there will be a couple of discussions so that we both are on the same page with respect to what he wants or what he has stated in terms of his goals, and insurance and investments and everything is the same thing. So once that happens, then I prepare the draft plan, I explain, and that's the first time after the draft plan is where the lengthy conversation happens. And
Okay.
that's
Till
where-
now, these were what, half smaller conversations,
very small,
understanding.
yeah, half an hour, not even half an hour, 45 minutes max. So this is where they probably 2 to 3 hours, or sometimes in multiples of 2 to 3 hours, because this is where our first step of education is happening to them. Like setting expectations, especially what I try and impart to them, saying that sensitizing them the link between the inflation and returns and why they should understand that. The sooner they understand it, the better it is for their own overall thing. And why we are going around certain instruments for certain financial goals, how I arrived at certain risk mitigation tools, right from emergency to term insurance to medical insurance, try and bring in as many scientific approach as possible, as many practical, relatable stuff to them on top of the education part. That is where a lot of time goes to impart to them. And so the draft is by and large to, at least we both are on the same page in terms of, both in terms of quantification and in terms of direction. So only thing that needs to happen is subsequently is fine tuning. Let us assume hypothetically, he wants to buy a car every 5 years. Then after all these things, he says that no, last thing I had till 10 years. So now I want a car only once in 7 years, and after 65, I don't want a car. Random stuff. Small fine tunings and all of that. So once that happens, then the final, I rework once after incorporating these iterations and all of that. That's when I give the final plan, and that's where it happens. And obviously, all subsequent for the next 1 year, it is entirely valid. Umpteen number of discussions it can happen. It is open for him to happen. Thank God, as of now, I didn't have to have umpteen discussions with anybody. And touch wood, it has been going good in that sense.
Fair. So the idea is that, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I contact you typically today, this is the first time we are meeting, and I come to you, sir, I don't know what to do with the money that I have. These are my investments, this is my income and savings. Then how long does it normally take to get to that draft plan stage?
Look, the point is, the biggest emphasis that I give is I have a list of 40 to 50 items in terms of expenses. So most often, people are not on top of their expenses.
It's very hard to do. Who remembers all that data? I don't know how much
So
I'm
when
spending.
I give that sheet, so normally people say that मैं आपको 2 दिन में भर के दे देता हूँ.
वो तो नहीं होने वाला है, boss. That's why I'm asking that how long
for
does
example, I'm telling you about those people who are already saying that I've been compiling this for the past 5 years.
Okay.
So that though then sometimes takes 2 weeks and sometimes take 1 month. There is a potential guy who is said to come back to me after 2 years. So I'm not saying it is wrong, but I genuinely am happy that they are taking time, because this is something beyond the foundation, if you could allow me to say that. It's the most important. I strongly believe if you are on top of your expenses, 70% of your financial plan is done. You actually don't even require a guy, the way I see it. And that's largely been my experience, and the way I've conducted, I've seen it. There is a glow in somebody's face when he or she knows that that person is on top of their expenses. which is not the case otherwise, because you are always in chasing the next best or the next better kind of an instrument or a higher return and all, because you don't know where you're standing in that sense.
Fair. And let's say, so in typically what you have seen is in a month you get to the draft plan stage.
Yes. By and large, yeah. Between the third week and the fourth week, yes.
Okay.
Ideally, yes.
And how long in your experience typically guys take to execute that plan?
So in our agreement itself, SEBI is directed to say that execution is, first of all, I can't be part of the execution. RIAs can't be part of the execution part. And we can't even control the execution, saying that, because in the agreement itself it's clearly written, it is entirely up to the individual to do that. So by and large, they do it, because what happens is there is a certain recurring SIPs which they have started, which for variety of reasons. That's point number one. Point number two, the taxations have changed so much, due to which there is certain practical imperfections if they try and do or sell something right away and all of that, or do something of that part. And there is certain emotional angle for certain things. So sometimes it takes longer time, but otherwise, like within say probably 4 to 6 months, they are on track on doing that. At least they know. The biggest benefit for me, or the way I see it, is they at least know now
what needs to be done,
why they are doing certain things. Like earlier, like you began with saying that, itne paise mujhe bata do kahan. The question everybody has is where to invest. I'm saying that shouldn't be the question at all. The only question that people should know is why to invest. Because once you know the why, the entire funnel of so many mutual fund schemes which you stated, so many apart from mutual fund and other investment opportunities, will all trickle down to tiny number of ones of where to invest. So knowing that why is very important. And I put my best effort to ensure that, because if I tell them why, so they will not quit. There are multiple benefits out of this. You will not sell earlier than it is. The biggest important thing in financial planning is people need to know, or rather to become financially healthy, if I can say, people need to know when to say no to the products and services which doesn't suit that individual person. This is what it will do. Once you know why you are investing, your ability to say no to most of the things, or whichever is not applicable to you, हो गया तो आपका तो काम हो ही गया.
Fair. नहीं, और अगर मान लो जैसे हम लोग ये जो you're talking about plenty of products to say yes or no to. I do remember the article where you mentioned that equity versus debt. It's not that blindly you put all your money into equity and yes, it is going to grow. And इतना तो सर मेरे को भी समझ में आता है कि अच्छा हाँ, स्मॉल कैप तो हमेशा लार्ज कैप से ज़्यादा रिटर्न देगा, ये सब नहीं होता है. There is enough data to prove that.
But unfortunately, investors still get swayed. So even yesterday, somebody had noticed that कहीं तो एक पढ़ रहा था कि saying that right now you need to put 50% in small cap. So shocking है.
नहीं, आपके लिए शॉकिंग है, मेरे को तो समझ ही नहीं आता है. तो अच्छा हाँ ठीक है भाई, बोल रहा है, कौन बोल रहा है, क्या बोल रहा है, बोल रहा होगा आदमी. तो मैं वही थोड़ा सा समझना चाहता हूँ कि ये जो प्रोडक्ट्स के अंदर, बिकॉज देर आर सच अ लार्ज नंबर ऑफ प्रोडक्ट्स दैट एग्जिस्ट, अगर मान लो मैंने वाई फिगर आउट कर भी लिया, जैसे मैं आपसे अपनी बात करता हूँ, मेरा अभी लड़का है, वो LKG के अंदर पढ़ता है, पढ़ लिख गया तो कॉलेज तो जाएगा कभी ना कभी, वो कॉलेज की फीस का तो मेरे को जुगाड़ करना होगा. When I have this sort of conversation, typically, अरे यार ये तो 12 साल बाद का, 15 साल बाद का है, तुम एक काम कर, तुम सारा का सारा पैसा उठा के स्टॉक मार्केट के अंदर लगा दे और 12-15 साल के अंदर वो हो ही जाएगा. ये करने में मेरे को डर लगता है, बिकॉज यू नो आई कांट रियली. मेरा अगर कोई शौक का होता ना कि अच्छा हाँ मेरे को एक बार 10 साल बाद में वर्ल्ड टूर पे जाना है, तो 10 की जगह 12 साल बाद चला जाऊँगा, 8 साल बाद चला जाऊँगा, इट्स ओके. बट आई कांट मेस अराउंड विद दिस मनी. So how do I take a call on which product to choose for, or just maybe even looking at equity versus debt over such a long period? How do I figure that out?
So thanks for raising this question. So this is exactly what I do. You're saying education. I'm saying let me add marriage to this, which is slightly a bit more flexible here and there. So I consciously ensure that there are certain government-sponsored schemes where bulk of the investment happens for education in that sense. And if you are an employed person, then you have the option of PF. Now, incidentally, both these instruments, you'll notice that it's giving you at least 2% more than inflation. And often there is tax-free also. So if you have a girl child, then it's even more benefit that you put, and one more additional instrument gets added to this. So once
That's
again,
the
use
SSY
Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. So if you do proper tax planning between the couple, you are adequately taken care of between whole lot of these schemes. So that gives you, in your own statement right now, you will notice that there is a sense of fulfillment. If I can't say achievement because it is yet to, but एक fulfillment आ गया तो I have at least taken a large portion of it has been taken care of. Now it's obviously very difficult to cough up something like 5 CR for an overseas education, but at least you will know कि कितना हो सकता है type. Then the balance is something like we'll have to figure it out once again. The affinity to what kind of debt, equity, the individual has, and based on that the decision happens. Now thankfully, because of the tax changes or whatever, the kind of instrument that you can select has got even more narrowed. Earlier there was at least a wider spectrum because there was no taxation on equity, there was indexation. Abhi to aur bhi narrow ho gaya. So it actually gives you much better opportunity to at least take what I would say is calculated risk on how much return you can have and how much you should not expect and all of that. So these two goals, education and marriage, if it is taken care of, the only by and large the biggest one which is remaining would be retirement. The others would be somewhere interim, would be house, car, vacation, like you said, some anniversary, milestone types and all. Those by and large we can figure it out how this happens. So during further retirement and all, because we continue to do work in the same organization, then that PF will also accrue in that sense. So a certain portion of retirement is also taken care of. Then it only leaves it और कितने साल काम करना है नहीं करना. So that's how, if you plan in this kind of a fashion, there is almost with certainty I can tell you, you will meet all your goals within the stipulated time or less than the stipulated time probably, with lesser amount of money, and in all probability you might retire earlier than you anticipated. Because that is what I have achieved so far.
Okay. तो सर ये तो broad बात हो गई education के लिए and retirement के लिए. Let me ask you a very specific question now. Imagine a 35-40-year-old who is working in a salaried job. What will be your financial advice to him?
So I'm taking this as for the first time he's starting to do it. He has not done it. He has not done any history. So usko pata bhi nahi hai, he's clueless type and all. Have a simple 6-step for these guys. First of all, he or she should have an emergency fund, at least which should be strive for equivalent to 6 months of expenses. Second, that individual should have the right kind of medical insurance. I'm not getting into specific because that will change to individual to individual. The right kind of term insurance. Fourth, he or she should utilize in the most tax efficient manner all the government sponsored scheme like PF, PPF, Sukanya Samriddhi. They should try and utilize that. Any surplus beyond this should be, he or she should start investing in a balanced advantage fund scheme. There are different AMCs depending upon this preference and thought process. And lastly, start writing a will. This is what I would recommend any person who is starting off, because this will give them a very strong foundation in their financial health journey.
You recommend writing a will to a 35, 40-year-old?
Yes.
Why would you say so?
I don't have to say anything. Look at COVID. It has been a grim reminder of all the things that I spoke about. Everything came into play. Your emergency fund came into play. Your medical came into play. I've heard about 25 lakhs and all bills. Your life has come into play.
I agree. As a matter of fact...
let me clarify. When I'm saying this will, I'm not trying to say it. I'm planning for, like typically they say, मैं मेरा death का planning कर रहा हूँ. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to distribute my wealth. No, I'm not trying to say that. I'm saying it from a predominantly, given Indian rules and laws, it is the only valid legal document which will determine who gets what and to how much. Only a will can do it. So please treat it as an administrative document and not with any kind of a negative connotation. That's it.
Fair. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you had the chance to try out the handauncle.com AI.
Yes, I tried it, yes.
One of the things that I am working on that is a lot of people don't really know what to write in their will.
Oh.
They can't really go to a lawyer because, it is an expensive thing and it keeps on getting delayed. So one of the things that I've built in Hand Uncle is that you can go and you can draft a very basic, simple will that can be done. But if you tried it, what did you think about the AI part of it?
Oh, actually, it was almost I found it almost like interactive. It was not like a predetermined, formula-driven stuff. I didn't see it like that in that sense.
It's not. It's AI. Yeah. It is supposed to be.
Because normally, अगर technology का जब भी होता है, you have a preconceived notion that ये typically ही formula आएगा. Okay. So that was one very good thing. Secondly, I only think that there are a couple of small tweaking that will happen because I'm still the old school. So I did not, it took me some time to figure it out. Was मैं कुछ भी लिख सकता हूँ. I was thinking that was वो मेरे को step by step पूछेगा ये कितना है वो कितना है इसके बारे में क्या करना है. Because the responses that it gave, it assumed a certain assumption in terms of inflation, in terms of drawal rate, in terms of returns and all, which ideally it should have given that opportunity for the other person to mention it कि मेरा inflation आप इतना ही लो. Because
वो आप कर सकते हो मतलब so you can keep talking to it and telling कि नहीं अगर suppose वो 6% ले रहा है उसको बोलो नहीं 6 मत ले 9 ले वो सुनेंगे अंकल.
So that kind of an iterative is not what I thought it was there. Because मैंने ये बोल दिया उसने मांगा ये बोल दिया खत्म. तो so maybe there is a drop down box or something of that.
Fair.
And the second thing is, at least from a risk profiling, because my entire job is predominantly on risk profiling. It is left on the individual to determine whether he is moderate, conservative or aggressive. I will tell you where the problem is. And this is my practical thing. You ask anybody, a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, whoever is equity market savvy, I have a tremendous appetite. I want to invest, I can invest even 70% in equity. I said, okay, what percentage of your portfolio, if it erodes, you will be concerned. I'm not even saying panic. You know what the number is? 10-12%.
तो फिर 70% कहाँ लगा रहे हो आप?
Exactly, which is what I'm trying to say. Why I'm highlighting that is, if that person individual says that I'm an aggressive investor and whatever, whether it is AI or some other model or even genuinely somebody does it, the train goes in not only in the wrong track, it's for mishap.
Fair.
So do not leave it on the individual to determine moderate, conservative and aggressive. You please incorporate that to evaluate it. So in that sense.
Sir, वो भी incorporated है. So there is a risk assessment test module which will ask you a 15 questions.
But वो पूछा नहीं because when he did my asset allocation.
वो आपको बोलना पड़ेगा कि you have to tell it, please analyze my risk profile. अगर आप उसको बोलोगे please analyze my risk profile, it will give you a set of 15 questions.
So why I'm saying is because मेरे को retirement के लिए मेरे को इतना डालना है.
हाँ.
So he automatically assumed that I'm a certain kind of an risk profile वाला investor. He should not do that. Then he should take a pause there. Yes.
Fair. करता हूँ, मैं उसको मॉडिफाई करता हूँ. दैट कम्स इन वर्जन 3 ऑफ अंडा अंकल विल हैव
Please
दैट.
do
लेट
that
मी
in that sense. And lastly, at some point of time, because once again we are Indians, right? At some point of time, there would be at least for a couple of queries. I'm sure everybody will have a query, even if he is the most tech savvy. So something like a bot or something, if it is there, it will like this should ideally do wonders for majority of the people who, like you said, who do not want to go to a third party and discuss their finance.
ये सर मेरे को इतना ज़्यादा मतलब आप तो प्रोफेशनली करते हैं, आपके पास में तो लोग आते होंगे मुझसे, बिकॉज आई रन दिस चैनल, और लोगों को लगता है मेरे को फाइनेंस के बारे में बहुत पता है. नहीं पता है भाई लोगों मेरे को. प्लीज़ स्टॉप कमिंग टू बी विद फाइनेंशियल क्वेरीज, आई डोंट नो शिट. तो लोग आते हैं कि अच्छा हाँ हांडा मेरे को बता यार मैं पैसे के लिए क्या करूँ, कहाँ लगाऊँ एंड ऑल दैट, और मैं बोलता हूँ कि मेरे को नहीं पता है. बट स्टिल वो लोग they want financial advice, but they are not willing to share their current financial status for that conversation, which I believe is very, very important. कि भाई तुम कितना कमा रहा है, कितना बचा रहा है. नहीं तू तो ये मेरे को बता दे कि मेरे को 10 लाख रुपया लगाना है, मैं कहाँ लगाऊँ, कौन सा शेयर खरीदना है. मैं ऐसे नहीं होता है. And I do believe that is where AI and tech will be, because it's completely anonymous. People might be more willing to share their information
My
with an
only
AI.
thing is if they do not do that risk assessment properly, then like I said that there is likely to be
Correct.
problem
Correct.
in that sense, because वो सोच के उसको लगेगा अरे AI ने बोला है, because that becomes the new guru, right?
Correct.
So AI is a new guru. So उसने बोला अरे इसने कैसा गलत किया, because then you're just you have not addressed the problem.
Fair.
Okay, it is like old wine in new bottle,
Fair. तो या
because
तो
it doesn't answer your why.
हाँ, so then I think if something like this can happen कि भाई एडवाइस देने के पहले तुम अपना रिस्क असेसमेंट करवा, उसके बाद में ही तुमको फिर मैं बताऊंगा कि क्या करना चाहिए या क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. मे बी समथिंग ऑफ दैट सॉर्ट नीड्स टू बी.
I have this thought, if you ask me very frankly, to ensure that RIAs have a better say or better role to play. Like in pharmaceutical industry, the pharmaceutical shop, the pharmacy, does not give you medicine unless there is a prescription.
अच्छा हाँ, तो ये पहले ये करो फिर उसके बाद में ही
So
मिलेगा.
then there is the entire ecosystem is there. MFD has a role to play. RIA has a role to play. Everybody has a role to play. And then like you update once in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, let there be an updation saying that update your risk profile accordingly or based on event. Because you do an updation of KYC every 6 months, I'm supposed to. I think that's what people have to do.
Fair.
So do something like that. Then I'm not saying that this is from an RIA perspective. I'm saying this from an ecosystem perspective. At least till the time the majority of the Indians know कि वो लोग क्यों इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए types and all of that. This could be a better way.
Yeah, that why needs to be figured out.
And doing this via the risk assessment, so then he can go to any MFD then. He can say, and so the MFD is as also answerable. This is the assessment I got and this is what I did.
Correct.
If he churns, then that is his problem, but I have stood by the prescription.
Fair.
In that sense.
Fair. करता हूँ सर, इस पे काम करता हूँ. And before I wrap up, I do have a list of questions that I wanted to ask. And I would request you to wrap them up fairly quickly ताकि हम लोग ये episode 1 घंटे के नीचे रख पाए.
I hope there is no coffee hamper in the end.
Nah, unfortunately no. We can probably head out for coffee after the show, but no hampers, I'm sorry. We are still not sponsored. If there is any sponsor who wants to sponsor coffee hampers, please reach out to me on ravihanda@gmail.com.
Till that time it is self-service.
Till that time it is self-service. Hari sir. So, simple, straightforward questions. What is the one product that you avoid?
I only believe in equity, debt, and real estate.
So, what do you avoid?
Anything beyond this?
No gold?
No.
Okay. What is your current asset allocation?
By and large, depending upon what my cash flow requirement is, I deploy it accordingly. So if it is immediate, recurring and all, it will be predominantly debt, otherwise equity. That's what I do. So it is not static in that kind of a percentage in terms of that basis.
Okay, so you don't really maintain a 70-30 or
Nothing
a
of that
50-50 or anything
So
like
neither
that.
for me nor for my clients, it's entirely requirement specific. There is no formula driven, there is no age driven, there is no affinity driven, nothing of that sort. It's all requirement basic specifics.
Okay. What are a couple of simple money habits that you believe anyone watching can very easily follow?
One is, I will say a couple of habits and what they need to learn, very importantly. One of the habits that they need to inculcate is be on top of your expenses. The sooner you get on top of it, it is better for yourself. I'm not saying tightening the belt, nothing of that sort, but at least be on top of it. The second is make tax efficient choices, both on your recurring income as well as your investments. Because I'm of the strong believer that tax planning will help you to become wealthy or financially healthy faster than chasing returns. This is one they want to do it. And the other thing which from an education perspective, which I would recommend people to learn is, the sooner they learn, the better it is the link between inflation and returns.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a tax efficient choice?
So like in the government sponsored schemes, if you're getting 8.2% in your PF or 7.1% on PPF, 8.2% on Sukanya Samriddhi, this is like you're getting 2% more. And like for example, everybody knows that there is an employee deduction that is available. But not many people know there is a voluntary contribution to Provident Fund that can also happen. And both your contribution, that is employees, and the voluntary contribution, both put together can be as high as 2.5 lakhs. So this is like smart choices that they do. And this, if you mix it along with the knowledge of interest rates and returns, you will get to know at what point of time to avoid an equity product and when to stick to an assured return product or something of that sort, or a debt product in that sense.
Fair. Should you take a loan?
Depending upon for why. So there are two loans which I always recommend one should take. One is a home loan and the other is an education loan. Okay? That's a no-brainer according to me if somebody doesn't take that. The loans that you should completely avoid are personal loans, credit card loans. Credit card loans, obviously in that pecking order is credit card loans. There is no way somebody should take it. And ideally avoid also personal loans. If somebody wants to use a thumb rule or kind of thing, never ever take a loan whose interest rates are double the inflation rate.
Okay.
Because there is no way in hell you're going to earn that.
Fair. But people say you earn anything in equity, so why not just put all my money in equity and let the wealth grow?
So if you look at it over the last 25 years, I've written an article, it is seen there also. More than 50% of the time, equities have not even delivered more than inflation rate over the last 25 years on a monthly basis, but annual return on a monthly basis, if you notice it. So there is something called as fact, and then there is something called as perception.
No, but the India growth story and everyone making 14%, that seems to be the story that I've been told at least 100 times by
Agreed. I totally
500
agree.
people.
So for that, I can only answer is just think about the situation in March 2020, if you were retiring and you wanted that corpus and everything was invested in equity. So overnight you're 30% down. So that is not going to, time and tide waits for no man. Equity over a period of time, subsequently in the next 3 years it has gone everything. But what happened if you were retiring at March 2020, or you had a child's education to be done? You know what? You couldn't say that markets is down. You can't go and tell the principal, please hold on 2 years, markets will go up, I'll give you the fees. That's the reason.
Fair. Any final message for our listeners?
First of all, I enjoyed doing this and thanks a ton for really appreciate. One is that the sooner they understand the dynamics between interest and inflation, or rather inflation and returns, and being on top of the expenses. That's what I keep it repeatedly do it. And lastly, it's a misconception that kali equity se paisa banta hai. So there are been actually debt has also given returns. There are other asset classes. So keep it very simple, make it very practical as possible, and what you can relate to. आपको समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, so there's no point in doing it. So just keep it very simple, like they keep on marketing. They say KISS policy, and the first two things, knowing about inflation and returns and being on top of expenses.
Fair. तो सर मेरी तो एक खुशकिस्मती है कि मैं तो आपसे डायरेक्टली मिल पाया, बट अगर कोई हमारा लिसनर है, वो आपसे कांटेक्ट करना चाहता है, he wants to take your services, what is the right way to approach you and contact you?
So I have a website by the name of shankark.com. So he can read about my profile and all of that. So there is a contact details over there. Otherwise, he can approach me through my LinkedIn. So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. So my ID over there is Shankar-K-RIA.
अच्छा.
So he can reach out to me.
नहीं, आई थिंक सर गूगल पे जाके मैंने शंकर RIA अगर मैं डालता हूँ तो
ideally
शंकर RIA डालने पे लिंक्डइन पे आपका प्रोफाइल इज प्रोबेबली वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट लिंक्स.
बट अगर वो लिंक्डइन में जाके डालेगा, आई थिंक सो देयर एल्गोरिथम इज लाइक
अच्छा,
तो गूगल से आ जाता है. एंड देन देयर इज अ व्हाट्सएप नंबर व्हिच इज देयर, so they can connect me through either of the three.
Would it be possible for you to share
I'll mention it, yes.
Okay, तो सर की वेबसाइट, सर की लिंक्डइन प्रोफाइल एंड जो व्हाट्सएप नंबर है, वो तीनों मैं अपने वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन में डाल दूंगा. आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट यू गाइज टू प्लीज कॉन्टैक्ट हिम इन केस यू आर ऑल्सो कन्फ्यूज लाइक अ लॉट ऑफ अदर 35-40 ईयर ओल्ड जिनके पोर्टफोलियो के अंदर रायता फैला हुआ है, और मैं जानता हूँ बहुतों के आप में से फैला हुआ होगा. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for taking out time.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.